Hey everybody, hope you've been having a great week so far. I meant to have this video out earlier, but I could not speak for the past couple of days. I'm still not 100% there, but I really want to get this out, so let's get into it. Discourse surrounding Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 has been a complete mess. From rumors and the terrible PR response from the studios, to lies, inconsistencies, attacks on the community, media gaslighting, and wild claims of child sodomy, it has been a hectic roller coaster and a minefield. My goal with this video is to try and clear things up as best as I can in regards to what's actually going on, without disregarding either side of the discourse, without disregarding reality, and with doing my best to set my own biases aside. It's going to be a long video, and so I'm sorry in advance if the timestamping is a bit scattered. So, a lot of the discourse I've seen online has been pretty crazy, with even some creators in the same space turning on one another, and all over a single game. This is something that bothers me to see, especially because it is pretty easy to see that it's being orchestrated to be this way. People who support wokeness in video games, such as game journalists, are feeding the flames and doing their own brand of sabotaging. Just look at IGN and what was the very first thing that they posted on launch day, a guide on how to be gay with Sir Hans, with a screenshot of the kiss scene in full display, something that one could even consider a plot spoiler, to be honest. To them, this game is a victory and a tool, because as opposed to the very first game back in 2018, which featured zero concessions to diversity and inclusion, and worse than that, it had a team of developers who staunchly stood up for their values and had zero tolerance for media gaslighting, trying to sink their game by labeling them as ists and phobes, the sequel here, on the other hand, is no longer an independent project doing whatever it wants to do, and does feature elements of diversity and inclusion, even if the devs claim to not have been influenced in any way, shape, or form. By this, I obviously am talking about taking an established straight character, technically two of them, and giving them an optional gay romance path for the minority in the modern audience to celebrate, not the existence of an optional same-sex romance in an RPG. That's usually a normal addition to RPGs, but more on this in just a little bit. And in regards to the gay character existing in the universe, that's already something that already existed in the first game. It doesn't bother me in the slightest, but it also doesn't count for, the game journalists and everyone else pushing this ideology, because the first game already had them, and it was still branded as something that is exclusive of these things, as a bigoted kind of game. Basically, something merely existing in the game world is simply not enough for them. It's not something that moves social impact through the game. Otherwise, the first game would have been celebrated and given 9s out of 10 as well. What they require is for the players to be able to engage in this kind of activity. But anyway, back on topic. Then, people on the other extreme have already been trying to sink the game since the moment that the rumor in regards to the existence of a gay character popped up. There was nothing about it being Henry even, much less Henry and Hans, only that there was a gay character and an unskippable sex scene with them. If the mere existence of a gay character was too much for them already, it makes me wonder if they even played the first game. This is something that hasn't stopped either. There's always something else going on with this more extreme branch. They've since been trying to claim that the game is a flop and losing players since day one, despite the fact that the game has gained a few more concurrent players after each day, concluding in a peak of 256,000 players on Sunday. And now the most recent development on this side is they are trying to say that the game needs to be banned because it is depicting child sodomy, which is another word for gay CP. And this is because if you check the codex of the first game, you can see that Sir Hans Capon was born in 1388, I believe it was. So by the time these games transpire, he would be like 15 years old, making him a minor in our world. But obviously, if you just look at the damn characters, you can see that they're not kids. They're presented and depicted as young adults. The codex of the game features various historical information, not direct in-universe lore in regards to the game itself. I mean, how could it? Look at Henry, for example. Henry and Hans are supposed to be around the same age. They've been aged up for the games, but despite this, their exact ages aren't really revealed, so you kinda just use your own head. Their voices are the voices of young men, they're mocap actors who were 3D scanned are grown-ass adults, they're tall, they've got facial hair. In fact, with Henry, you can even grow a full beard, and the crap that you get up to in the game is also obviously very grown up. Based on this, to think that they are minors is unrealistic and also a bit hypocritical because no one complained about banging wenches in the first game. If Henry is 15 years old, then what we did with Lady Stephanie in her bedroom after I ran across half of Bohemia to get her wedding gifts was 100% not legal.
All of a sudden she looks at me, she goes, well, if you could guess the color of my panties, I'll f*** you. And I'm like, okay, red. And she goes, they're green, but good enough.
I will say this though, Daniel Vavra didn't help the situation either by starting to go off about 12-year-olds and children banging with their parents watching in the same room. Like, what is this guy doing? Every time he opens his mouth about the game, it's like playing Russian roulette. He has since corrected himself, which is a good thing, but man. But anyway, yeah, the discourse online in regards to the game has been a mess because there's so much in between that is being ignored or forgotten, as people just mostly concern themselves with two things: the obvious success of the game and the optional nature of the romance choice, and of the extreme ultra anti-woke movement on the other side coping about sales of the game and trying to find other ways to make the game look worse than it actually is by either saying that it's 100% filled with ideological garbage or going down the child thing now. Therefore, painting a picture that there is no conceivable way for people to be apprehensive or unsupportive of this game unless they are an alt-right Puritan chud grifter. So let's just get to the bottom of it all, shall we? I will try to explain what exactly the issues are, and by the end of it, if you still want to disagree with me, that's fine, but if you did find value in the presentation of the issue, feel free to share the video whenever you find more examples of the discourse online surrounding the game getting completely derailed, especially when finding creators that you like picking fights with one another over small differences of opinion, especially while the game's media keeps themselves quiet, having a blast watching their opposition splinter into different groups from afar. Let's start by laying down a couple of important things first. The game itself has been fantastic so far, a really fun and immersive experience. It's been ridiculously easy to get caught up in this world and kinda just live in it, questing around, getting into trouble, exploring, taking the world in, getting better at combat, at sneaking, at stealing, finding ways to earn money, getting arrested for stupid shit. Seriously, not even joking, I did a side quest where I take a guy to jail. Once I put him in jail and the quest updates and I am back in control of Henry, I got arrested myself because I was in the jail area, which is a trespassing crime. But anyway, while I do know that there's some weird things here and there, such as Musa and his associated quests, which even feature the word anti-Semite, which I don't think it's a term that even existed back then, but whatever, either way, you guys can correct me on that if I happen to be wrong. And of course, the instances where you can choose to romance dudes, where Henry suddenly, you know, out of nowhere, gains a newly acquired taste for cock, it is still a far-fetched from a game that is filled with ideological immersion-breaking content, and I would know that after 100 hours of Veilguard, and I think that that's important to differentiate. I am aware of the slippery slope argument here, and we will get there in this video, but for now let's just establish the fact that with something that is beyond compromised, like many of the games that we saw last year, there isn't even a slippery slope anymore. Not with those games. Those games have already hit rock bottom. With Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, the argument for the slippery slope can be made, because overall the game is great and free of any bullshit, which is why it's so important to properly identify and justify where the argument for the slippery slope issue is. If we go around talking about child sodomy, we're just going to look like idiots. And for example, the fact that this game has an optional same-sex romance is not even the issue for me. The presence of gay characters in an RPG is not a deal breaker for me on its own. It always depends with how it's handled, and in terms of the setting, for example, Kingdom Come Deliverance, the first one, handled it very well because it acknowledged that this is a sinful and forbidden act. It's not an open thing, and to some extent, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 does the same thing, although it does have much less relevance than that. Henry and Hans don't hide themselves because they have to hide themselves. They don't really put a lot of relevance on that. They just happen to be in the same room together, and that's that. In my opinion, the issue with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is that they used Henry and Hans for this, thus taking a character that was already established as straight and changing his sexuality, and taking an established friendship that has been developing for a full game already and changing its nature as well. This is something I already mentioned in the previous video. I've always acknowledged it, but I never considered the true weight of the decision itself because I had rose-tinted glasses on when it came to the studio, or it was an issue raised in contrast with something else. So for example, if the argument is against some of John Della Rosa's wild claims, or a matter of comparing it to Veilguard and how all of this LG HD TV shit was ham-fisted in that game, then the perspective is shifted. So instead, let's just drop everything else around this matter and just look at it as what it is on its own, with nothing else standing in the way or filtering the information, or without disregarding it by merely saying it's optional, which we'll also directly answer in more detail in a second. So what we have is a choice to take two established straight characters, one of which was straight up confirmed by the studio itself to be straight, and to change their sexuality. This is essentially what they did. First, we have to let go of the "it's optional" part of the argument for a second, because that alone has never been a good argument for this kind of thing when there's shady shit attached to it, and any honest person knows this. Otherwise, a lot of the garbage injected into Dragon Age Veilguard could also be excused by saying that it's optional. Obviously, this excuse cannot be used here because it doesn't take away the underlying intentions from BioWare to fill the game with divisive, intersectional, contemporary political garbage. The thing is that Veilguard took it so far that it's easy to pinpoint it, target it, and criticize it, whereas Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 did not, and remains such a good game regardless that pinpointing these issues and calling them to attention is difficult and immediately invites that useless, passionate hostility that people normally feel when attacking something that they love. To this, I simply say that I love it too. Instead of writing this script, I would rather be playing it right now. But it doesn't sit well to ignore this issue. More than that, it's annoying to go online and see this argument come up over and over again, and people with valid concerns who are either skipping it, waiting for a sale, or even playing it regardless but worried about the future of the studio being disregarded and lumped together with John Della Rose, Melanie Mack, and John F. Trent. When you're talking about original blank slate characters in an RPG, an optional same-sex romance is absolutely optional. I'm not going to complain about it. If you take Mass Effect, Skyrim, Dragon Age, Fallout 4, or Baldur's Gate 3 as an example, we create our own characters and we have our own stories right out of the gate. At this point, having preferably well-written characters to romance regardless of the gender that we pick our playable character to be is purely optional. I'm completely with you there. However, Henry is not a blank slate fella. Henry is Henry, much like how Arthur Morgan is Arthur Morgan, or Cole Phelps is Cole Phelps, or Geralt is Geralt, and this makes the situation different. It is no longer merely an RPG that has an optional same-sex relationship, it's a deliberate decision to change something about the character from one game to the next, regardless of our freedom to engage with it. Again, I understand the "it's optional" argument. We only see it if we want to see it, and if we don't want to see it, then we don't. And that is a very good thing, but we cannot ignore the decision that was made. When it comes to ideological influence in video games or in studios, analyzing the intent behind certain decisions is very important. Why are people so worried about Ghost of Yotai, for example? Is it all just a bunch of fucking misogynists? Or is it because of their choice of hiring a radical trans activist to be the actress for the main character? A decision that could, it doesn't mean that it does, but it means that could be attached to more suspicious decisions behind the scenes. The same actress, by the way, that was hired to play one of the rooks in Dragon Age Veilguard. Obviously, there's a lot of misogynists in this world, just like there's a lot of fucking Pokemon card collectors, you know, it doesn't matter. They're a crazy world, a lot of smells, but the majority of people expressing concern are concerned because of this. They're concerned because there's a certain pattern that decision fell into. to, which in the case of Veilguard was confirmed, and that now I hope to God will not be the same situation with Ghost of Yotai. I really hope that that game is going to be fantastic. But in any case, the decision is there, and the concern is there because certain decisions fall within certain patterns, because they have certain intentions, and that is the core of the slippery slope argument. It's seeing something questionable that adheres to a certain pattern that we've been recognizing in a lot of games influenced by DEI and ESG and excusing it as optional. It's kind of like the pronouns and the additions of third genders or body type A and B nonsense in certain video games. It's usually optional. You don't have to pick the non-binary or the they-them, but you know precisely why it's there, and you know who it is in there to appease or to appeal to. And usually, what happens in these cases, something that is now more than proven over what we've seen happening in our games industry for a decade now, is that these things pop up first as optional choices. Just a tiny little seemingly insignificant nugget of representation or inclusion. Perfectly tolerable at first, something that truly manifests itself as a, oh come on, seriously, who cares, the game is great, just don't press the gay buttons. And then when the next game comes along, it's another couple of things, and eventually some of those things start presenting themselves more overtly without even looking to the player to initiate it, or it justifies itself with similar reasons, like for example a character like Tash, someone whose personal questline you don't have to continue, someone who you don't have to have in your party, thereby limiting some of her cringy lecturing scenes, but it's still something that's in the game, taking up space and resources and presenting a certain ideology instead of giving way to better content that is uncompromised. And then eventually some of these optional things just become the default, so much so that you look around now and most games that let you create a character are no longer using the male and female option, they're just using the body type A and body type B option. So anyway, I hope that at least explains why the it's optional thing does not fit here, as it leaves out the very important context that this isn't a mere blank slate character option, it's a retcon of an existent character. Mechanically speaking, it's just an addition, but the ideological aspect of it is inescapable, and it's why a lot of people are unable to let go of this. I'll try to explain it, and people who feel more strongly in regards to this can let me know in the comments if I got it right or not. It's kind of like race swapping a character. It presents this sort of stance that the original state of the character or the game was incorrect and needs to be changed or updated for a modern audience. In God of War Ragnarok, for example, Angrboda is changed to be black. We can all run around a circle and pretend like it doesn't matter and like it's a creative freedom decision or whatever, but that'd just be copium. We all know why Angrboda was changed to be presented as black. We all know that when these companies get in bed with investors that push and fund DEI and ESG, they end up having to put it into their games somehow. And you know what else? I enjoyed Ragnarok. I thought that game was brutal. I cringed at some of the scenes with Angrboda and Atreus. A couple of them felt like I was watching a Marvel MCU Phase 4 movie like Quantumania or something, but overall I had a blast with that game. I enjoyed the Valhalla DLC as well, even though I do wish that we had fought... I'm gonna shut up now before I accidentally spoil the game for someone. The point is, I can be enjoying this game and I can still look at their little decision to race swap Angrboda and see what they were deliberately doing there. And similarly, I can also look at the decision to take Henry and give him gay options in this game to be the same kind of concept, where the original idea was a problem, somehow, and the injection of diversity and inclusion in its place was more important than retaining that original idea. Like, come on, we all know why these decisions were made. What are we, fucking blind here? What are we, fucking stupid? What are we, fucking asleep or something? It's something that would never happen the other way around. It's something that doesn't add anything at all to the game, and it's painfully obvious. And it's honestly only exacerbated by seeing the romance path with Hans Capon. It truly is not forced on the player, but it is also very dry and uneventful, making it seem like it was just put in there as an afterthought, just to try and modernize Kingdom Come Deliverance into being a more modern and inclusive game with more romance options, which I do understand is a profitable concept, as proven by games like Baldur's Gate 3. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but again, changing Henry's sexuality for it and adding Hans Capon and some other guys, I know at least one more guy that you can romance, does send the very clear message that it is a bad thing if he was still portrayed as a straight man and all the options were women, or sends the message that this big new RPG not featuring any inclusion of any kind is a bad thing. And so, for the sake of their new owners and for the sake of the modern audience, and also potentially for the sake of other things related to politics within the industry, where some games don't even get a chance at awards or high number reviews from official outlets unless they contain some diversity and inclusion elements, seriously look it up, these are sadly serious clauses for some Game Award shows and for official reviews. And it's also something that Daniel Vavra was very concerned with online, because anytime a review came in that was like 50 or 60, he immediately pounced on them, showing that for someone who has always been so involved with Gamergate, who knows that, or at least should know, that game reviews are bullshit from these, from these outlets at least, he was really concerned with having a high Metacritic critic score. So for the sake of all these things, the studio had to take their previously established straight character and change that. And to justify it, the director goes into meta meaning bullshit in regards to how bisexuality works, where he's met men who believed that they were straight all their lives, but then one day realized that they were bisexual. While this is true in real life, we are not in real life. When you make an RPG, you code your character to be however you want your character to be, which at the time of the first game was a straight guy with no gay romance options, which they could have put in there if Henry truly was bisexual, and now in the second game it is changed. And I don't want to see any excuses in the comments trying to say something like, there's a lot of things that have changed. Henry didn't know how to dry herbs, and now he does. Henry didn't know how to use crossbows, and now he does. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of mechanical changes from the first game to the second one, but if we're not intellectually dishonest, we know what we're talking about here. We're talking about, when it comes to the sexuality thing, we're talking about an ideological change that directly ties into diversity and inclusion in video games. And I said it before and I will say it again, I would respect the director and the studio much more if they came down to earth and got real with us and told us that they have certain obligations that they have to meet, and that this was the best way that they thought to do it, that they're still fully committed to their original mission of making the best and uncompromising games that they can, but that the reality of the industry at the moment is this. And I believe that most of us could come to terms with that. I believe that most of us could work with that. After all, we do know that this garbage perpetuates throughout the AAA industry. We have seen how prominent it is. We've seen lists with creative restrictions throwing in quotas and shit for developers to keep in mind. We've seen lists of sensitivity training. We've seen the clown show that goes down at the Game Developers Conference. We've seen the fucking clip from BlackRock and the other ding-dong next to the BlackRock dude talking about how they need to force behaviors, and if companies don't meet certain goals, then they are fucked, I mean impacted. It really doesn't take much to understand that the reality in the industry is complicated, and that there are many studios out there with a lot of great developers who really just want to make the best game that they possibly can, but that they have to put up with certain things that come from way above their pay grade. But the only way to tell them apart from the activists within the industry is going to be through trust and genuineness. So while some of us could still not like it, at least we will have the genuineness from the studio. And then at that point, the debate would shift towards something along the lines of, how do we deal with the questionable content that games will be contractually obligated to have in their games, even if they don't have activists in their staff? Which is a discussion that is likely to come sooner than later anyway, because we may very well be entering a transitional period right now where studios are getting rid of activists so that their games aren't complete dog shit, but are still working with publishers or investment groups that enforce certain measures in order to benefit from grants or better interest rates through the ESG system. We can see a little bit of that through BioWare, for example, which got rid of all of those terrible writers that were responsible for the disaster that is Dragon Age Veilguard. Along with other people, BioWare was apparently reduced by half, but we all know that EA is not going to let go of those parameters anyway. So while the next Mass Effect game may not be as cooked as Veilguard was, the jury is still out on whether or not it's going to be enough to make it successful. Anyway, please don't get me wrong, I know the extremists who just want the game to flop because of the gay, regardless of how it was implemented or who it was, they would still be shouting from the top of the mountains that Warhorse has betrayed us and our trust, but at least they would have been wrong. As it is though, with Warhorse and especially Daniel Vavra's responses to people in regards to this subject, is it even wrong? Before we get into that, let's just conclude this point with the fact that when you look at this decision to take a straight character and changing their sexuality, there really is no reasonable justification for it that makes sense. It adds nothing to the game, it doesn't make the character better, it doesn't develop anything interesting, it doesn't even do anything for that like curiosity of wanting to see homosexuality depicted in the Middle Ages in a realistic way. It really doesn't do any of this, and it also doesn't appeal to the player base of the game. It's inherently a modern audience kind of decision. Okay, so now we're really going to get into the weeds here, so excuse me if this topic in particular ends up a bit jumbled because of having a lot of different things to address. I'll do my best to cut out the fat and organize my thoughts. I'm not going to talk about the entire situation that has been mishandled from the start. That's already been more than addressed in various videos for weeks now. This has been a PR nightmare after all. Instead, I want to talk about the things that make that decision in regards to Henry be an issue. As I was saying in the previous points, the "it's optional" excuse only works if there's no issues attached to the situation. Another thing that's important, and that I often touch on in various videos of mine when it comes to organic representation or diversity in games, is the intention behind the elements that are being put into the games. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, and I welcome the discussion, but going back to another thing mentioned in the previous point, in regards to studios having certain obligations that they're going to have to meet because of ongoing contracts and policies, even if they do get rid of their activists and put actually passionate people in charge. If the studio or Daniel Vavra had been honest and tried to communicate with people instead of the mess that has been going on online, which sadly includes examples of very disingenuous and untrustworthy behavior, then I could actually let this matter go, because at least their honesty would have come through and that would have shown a commitment of sorts. However, the opposite has happened time and time again. I don't even care about the other earlier matters, like when Daniel Vavra called Rev a grifter while he was defending his game, which by the way serves as an example that various creators were at some point defending this game. Which is another important thing, by the way. Just a little side note here, some people like to turn to them and do one of two things. Either call them grifters and homophobes who've been attacking the game for having a gay character, which is a total lie. Many creators, even big ones like Endymion, were defending this game at that time, and this is because there was that element of trust there for both Daniel Vavra and Warhorse, and this only changed because at every turn they have been letting people down with their responses to the community, and with more details coming to light. And the other thing some people are also doing is saying that these creators have folded and have no integrity, that they don't actually care, that they just shift their stances depending on which way the wind blows, and that sticking to one's values and opinions no matter what is what is truly commendable, and I couldn't disagree more with this either. This has been a developing situation, a test of faith for a lot of people who were seeing sussy stuff since the start, but out of trust for the developers still defended the game and remained excited for it. When things come up, or more nonsense or suspicious statements pile up, and by that I mean actual valid stuff, I'm not even taking the whole pedo side of the drama into account, as I don't take it seriously. It's the other stuff, which I'll be pointing out in a second, that does count. You can do one of two things. You can keep your original opinion, or you can reassess the situation. If a creator changed their mind in regards to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2's whole controversy and can back it up with arguments that make sense, then they're not being disingenuous. And honestly, if a creator wants to keep their original opinion and maintain supporting and worshipping the studio, then they better have arguments to back it up as well. Otherwise, it's not automatically commendable to not change your position during a changing situation. In other words, you don't get automatic integrity points just because you haven't changed your mind on something that's been developing. That's just a little vent on the side. Let's get back to the main topic now. there was an element of trust that was broken and that has put the intentions of the people in charge of this studio to question. On one hand, Daniel Vavra's erratic behavior was nuts, but that's a small thing in the grand scheme of things. We also had woked out community managers making a mess of things on Steam. This has already been more than covered as well, so I'm not going to go into it again. Just suffice it to say that they rolled out a bunch of community guidelines that were actually far bigger than I initially thought as well. Again, developing situation. But the worst thing was a reply that they gave in regards as to why Henry was straight in the first game, in which they said that it was due to budget constraints. Please keep this in mind for a little bit. Daniel Vavra also put up a list of Embracer's owners, saying that the most comical of the recent conspiracy theories that he hears every day is that Embracer was bought by BlackRock, and that they forced him to put DEI in KCD2. Always a great move to call conspiracy theories to shit that everyone knows is a fact, except for the wokies, who pretend like it doesn't exist. But anyway, let's move on. In order to disprove this crazy statement, he puts up a list of Embracer's ownership structure to show everyone how BlackRock is not in there. The thing is though, BlackRock isn't the only company forcing behaviors by holding ESG grants and penalties over people's heads. They're just the one that's the most talked about, the more prominent one. One of the others that is also well known is actually Vanguard, which is in the list that Daniel Vavra shared. In the West, this is the shit that is pushed. It's not solely pushed just by BlackRock or even just by BlackRock and Vanguard. He also said, wait till you find out who Savvy is. And I have no fucking clue what his point here was. Savvy is a group from Saudi Arabia. I think he specifically mentioned this as a gotcha, as in, how could our game be banned by Embracer's top investor, huh, Chud? How do you explain that, Chud? How would a Saudi Arabian company push us to put stuff in these games that they don't want in their own country, Chud? And that's just so stupid, because even though he said in an earlier post that the game hadn't been banned anywhere as to his knowledge, it actually did get banned in Saudi Arabia, because of course it fucking did. And Savvy Gaming Group being one of the top investors for Embracer doesn't mean anything. Tencent is also a big company with a lot of stakes in loads of Western gaming companies, including Ubisoft, as you know well. These big investment groups in the East are happily funding DEI bullshit in the West. It's one of the biggest reasons why DEI is such bullshit. Even if you don't even bother to tackle the actual arguments of the ethics and the success, or lack thereof, of diversity, equity and inclusion, it's the fact that big investment groups out in the Middle East and China will pump millions and 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 millions of dollars into funding diversity, equity and inclusion, but don't actually want any of it in any of their content. So games like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and many others, no matter how good they are, like for example Final Fantasy 16 as well, will get banned over there for merely featuring a gay character, which is the precise case of Final Fantasy 16. FF16 is actually a game that some game journals took issue with because it lacked diversity. They went for this medieval Central and Eastern Europe type of setting where we had no ethnic diversity in the lands. So basically the Empire of Sanbreque and Rosaria were white as fuck, the Iron Kingdom was also white but different, like Vikings sort of, and then other areas towards the south like the Dalmatian Republic was more Middle Eastern inspired. Regardless of this, the game featured one gay side character, and despite it being handled flawlessly, the game was still banned there because, well, that's all that it takes over there. Same with China and their problems with black people. They love funding DEI out here in the West, but you don't see Disney, for example, putting black actors in their posters for China. It's an ongoing meme at this point. So yeah, that means nothing as well. Another thing he did, and potentially the worst when it comes to showing bad intentions, is disregarding a past statement from a YouTube comment section, the one where it was confirmed that Henry was a straight character, by saying that he wasn't a community manager back then. Yet, that community manager knew more about the character and the spirit of the studio, the dedication to the art, and the complete disregard of artificial, contemporary political bullshit, even as far as to drop that line about sexuality not being what defines us. Let me actually read it really quickly. So the guy asked, So those players who are not straight will be forced to romance a woman? And Warhorse's reply was, nobody will force you to do anything, but you will play as Henry, the son of a blacksmith. And yes, he is straight and white and male and from Bohemia. Someone from France will not be able to play a French guy even if he loves his country. If you are in a wheelchair, you will be able to walk in game, and Henry will be able to have a dog in game even if you are more kind of a cat person. You will play as a Christian person even if you are Muslim, Hindu, atheist or Jedi. What if you are an artist and drawing is your life, and now you have to play as a character who will not be able to hold a brush or a pen at all? Or if you are tall or small or big or skinny, there is nothing wrong about people to have different preferences and heritages, but we cannot cover them all, and we don't want to. We want to tell the story of Henry, the son of a blacksmith from Silver Scalets, for the Scalets, and he will be different from you, not only in his sexuality, but also in his heritage, in his looks and in his biography, and many more. He maybe will be able to do things you are not able to do in real life, while he lacks in other tasks in which you are great. This game is not meant to be about you. You are not Henry, you are Jan Silva, and you will be able to play as Henry if you want to. You can play his role. There are so much facets that creates a character, a person, an individual. Being gay or straight is not the only difference between people. People are people. And there we have it. This clearly wasn't some shitty little comment like, budget constraints. That was a big comment that someone sat down and passionately wrote, a comment that spoke to the character and to the studio's attitude as a whole. To completely take a shit on that and disregard it by claiming that he's not a community manager, as if what community managers say isn't a law, and as if what was said there does not represent him or his game or his studio, is very, very interesting. Because weeks earlier, when community managers were fucking up his game's PR over on Steam by copy-pasting the fucking woke Bill of Rights that looks like it was borrowed by someone from Dragon Age Veilguard's staff or commissioned by Corinne Bush, and also by making the claim that Henry was always supposed to have gay romances, the only reason he didn't was because of budget constraints, Daniel Vavra and the whole of Warhorse remained silent. No one bothered to correct those statements. No one bothered to separate themselves from the character assassination that those things caused under the name of Warhorse. But a statement from back during the development of the first game that set this studio aside from other studios that were sacrificing their shit to pander to people who don't even bother to play these kinds of games. A statement so well written that even if you are a certified member of the modern audience with tenure, cannot even get mad at, as it tells it like it is without disrespect. That this is not an RPG where you place yourself in its world, this is an RPG where you take on the role of an established character. If you're disabled in real life, you can walk in game. If you're a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Jedi, whatever other religion, you will play as a Christian guy. If you don't know how to make swords, you will know how to make swords because you play as the son of a blacksmith, etc. Finishing the sentence with that great line in regards to sexuality not being the only thing that matters or that differentiates people. This statement needed correction. Again, let me put it into perspective. I understand not wanting to step on people's toes when you're working on a game and you have community managers which are often completely different departments from yours. I even said this in the previous video back when this first happened. But this dude did go ahead and cross that line. He crossed that line that says, no, I will not stand for my game to be misrepresented even if it's by a community manager. I will speak out and correct it, or at least distance myself or my game from statements that misrepresent it. But instead of crossing it to disavow woked out madness within the Steam forums, he instead disavows a fat comment that spoke to the identity that this studio had, the very same identity that people kept trusting and believing in this studio for years, and a comment that actually put thought into the identity of Henry as a character. That comment had more insight into it than anything that Vavra has said ever since these rumors started going about. This dude has been so hostile since the start of this, no matter what, no matter who or who he was with or what he was doing or where he was going. It's just been hostility, trolling, snarky dogshit replies. And the thing is, I can understand when it's against people coming at him with hostility and insults, but anyone asking questions is just a grifter or a grifter bot or a tourist or whatever, and honestly I've been beyond done with this dude's attitude. Some people are still going to worship this dude's nutsack as if he's some kind of legend, but after seeing the way that he keeps quiet as a pup whenever his community managers are going woke, but barks loud as a dog to dismiss and disavow past statements that have been there representing this company for almost a decade now, shows a completely different story. He should be extremely thankful to everyone who worked hard as fuck in making this game fun and engaging, because if the quality of the game reflected the kind of reputation that Daniel and these woked out community managers have given it, this game would be telling people not to buy the game, throwing tantrums, playing dumb to questions in regards to them alluding that there was no gay scene, because if you remember at the very beginning of the rumors, they quickly dropped a line saying, "Trust us, don't believe everything that you see on the internet." So if the rumor was that there was an unskippable gay scene, the only wrong part about that rumor is that it isn't unskippable. Why say, "Trust us, don't believe the internet," if the main point of the statement, which is the gay scene, was still true? Also playing dumb as to the fact that the decision to make Henry gay was asked by nobody. Obviously the nobody in this case isn't a literal 0%, because we all know that the people that work at IGN, for example, were starving for this studio to bend the knee and shove diversity and inclusion elements into it, such as grabbing Henry and giving him the same-sex romance partners, of which there are 2 as far as I'm aware. But we all know what people mean when they say that. We mean that this was not a decision for the fanbase of Kingdom Come Deliverance. This wasn't a decision that makes business sense. We know that these elements are not popular. We know that these elements don't sell games. It was a decision for the modern audience, and his inability to honestly engage with these sensitive matters are why I don't trust him and the future direction of this studio. Even with a quality game, this dude's PR skills are about as good as a guy with Tourette's in church. Even now, he's simply incapable of handling morons like John Del Rose by simply saying, "We obviously aged up our characters for the telling of the story in game. The codex merely has historical entries. When you played Assassin's Creed, did you think fucking Ezio Auditore da Firenze was a real motherfucker too? How many 15-year-olds with full beards have you seen?" But instead, off he goes on about 12-year-olds banging and having their parents watching like, what the fuck are you saying, dude? You sound insane. In closing, we're going through a very complicated time where people are very wary of this kind of content in video games. It turns this whole thing into a veritable minefield. We're also going through a time where certain people feel emboldened to show their true colors and to go full unhinged online. Some people who are against this game are hands down not actually concerned with gaming at all. They have agendas of their own. This is perfectly visible with the Gunnergate fiasco, where games like The First Descendant or Stellar Blade or anything else that features an attractive character and elements of fan service, or even just sexual elements in the game's story, will be demonized and even advocated to be banned from gaming by some of these people, among other delusional crap. I mean, who knows what else these people are going to come up with. Feel free to check out my videos in regards to the Gunnergate fiasco for more details. This is why I am so adamantly against this pedo nonsense in regards to KCD2. It's a stupid stretch mired in rage bait. People like John Del Rose, John F. Trent and Melanie Mack have agendas all on their own. It is simply that so far their shit aligned with our interests and they toned it way down. Now they're going full steam ahead, emboldened by their own little echo chambers that they built for themselves, that make them believe that their motives for pushing the shit that they push are righteous. And in other cases they're just literal grifters, like, you know, actual ones. Not the cases where woked out retards use this word because they don't like what someone is saying. I mean the literal definition of it, where you see people holding different values and opinions than the ones that they are actually supporting and voicing. It's a whole other way of pandering to certain audiences. And I suspect that we'll be seeing a lot more of these kinds of people popping up in 2025. There's going to be a big split in the communities of people who have advocated for anti-censorship and for the removal of ideology-fueled propaganda and socio-political messaging in gaming. Technically, we're already seeing it happen. happen. And I don't mind seeing it happen when it comes to extremes separating themselves from people that are not extreme. That's something that has always been obvious and that I've always felt anyway. Like you watch a video from Vavra Dark or you watch a video from Sungrand Studios and they are completely different videos from John De La Rose or John F. Trent or Melanie Mac. Even though there's always been this common goal that everyone was pushing towards, there's always been this difference between these types of people. It would sometimes shine through their content or their attitude, and now that they've been emboldened, well, it's just blatantly right there. It's just right there for everyone to see. The masks have fallen off and goddamn, some of these motherfuckers are crashing out already. So anyway, this split, there is no doubt that it's happening. And sadly, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 has been thrown right into the middle of this shit. During a normal time, the discourse surrounding this game would be lighter, less hostile. I would hope so at least, where everyone could acknowledge the game's quality and have a rational and informative discussion in regards to the things that I mentioned earlier in the video, with compromises during a transitional period, the matter of a slippery slope, etc. You know, things that are definitely important. Because these things are definitely real, and people must discern between a situation where we would be enabling a slippery slope by defending an element of a product, case in point the quote-unquote optional romances with men, as Henry in this game, or a situation where we'd be looking at a team of developers doing their very best that they can to comply with the demands that come from way above their pay grade, case in point the same situation if we had seen Daniel Vavra and Warhorse acting right and fostering an environment of trust and dialogue with us instead of what we've seen go down. During a normal time, this would have been it, with the odd extremists here and there, and maybe during a time like that, even someone like Daniel Vavra might not have been so unhinged online, even though the time to excuse his behavior as stress has long passed for me. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, back with the Rev thing, sure, maybe too much stress getting into the guy, cut him some slack, you know, whatever. But now, nah, I mean at this point he's waking up every morning and choosing violence. It is my hope that with this video I can put everything into a cleaner perspective. I don't have all the information yet and I would have preferred to actually finish the game so I could have more context into, for example, the character of Musa, but since I'm taking my time with the game and the game is big as fuck and I've also been sick lately, I sadly don't have any more info on that. So that's why I didn't mention anything in regards to that character. But I think the main issue of this controversy is explained here, and so I hope that people can have a better understanding of the valid concerns that people have with this game without being mired by extremist sentiments or arguments. At the end of the day, it's unavoidable to see the change of a straight character as something that is totally normal and natural and totally not related at all with a multinational massive corporation that now owns the studio. And while it may be excusable to some because of the quality of the game being more important, it's still a valid concern to address and keep track of for future reference, just as it is a valid position to not excuse it and to not support it. It's up to the customer to decide on whether or not it takes it too far for them, or if they don't care, or if they do care but are willing to compromise if the game is good, or if they'd rather wait for a sale or whatever. And all of this is much easier if a studio is openly communicating instead of acting like an asshole online. I have seen so many comments in my videos and on Twitter saying that they don't even care that much about the optional romance. It's the attitude from Daniel Vavra and the shadiness from the studio's behavior, you know, because of the inconsistency between what one person says and what was said before, you know, that kind of stuff that has made them not want to buy the game, that has put them off from wanting to buy it at least at launch price. And that doesn't surprise me at all. I can't blame people for being sick and tired of this. As I said, it's a complicated time where people are very wary of this kind of stuff, very wary of DEI on websites, wary of suspicious stuff put into games, wary of a slippery slope where small additions stick and then become the standard while pushing for more progressive elements in following future games, wary of consultants, wary of activist types involved with the games, poisoning the well with the community manager positions, etc. And so, with this plaguing the industry for so many years, people have adopted a zero tolerance kind of attitude towards it. I know some gamers can be assholes online, I get it, I really do, but acting out towards everyone as a response instead of building trust, especially with big communities online that are absolutely on your side, is a really stupid move. And Daniel Vavra did not have to go down this route. He absolutely had all kinds of support. He had Grums, he had Endymion, he had Reb, for example, who defended his game even after the rumors came out. The truth is that it's going to take some time for trust in the AAA industry to develop. As of now, there's a huge lack of trust, and we can't also blame it all on the aforementioned channels that I mentioned. You know, the nutcases that are going on and on and on and on and on and on and on about this child sodomy and getting upset at the First Ascendant for having girls in bikinis in it. Because at the end of the day, they're just expressing their opinions, and it was the industry that created this problem to begin with, where people listen to those opinions and they feel some kind of resonance. It was the industry that made it so that people would flock to these channels and resonate with them because there was nobody else to fucking listen to people. If anyone bothered to mention a concern or a criticism of any kind, they were branded as bigots and shut down or banned. Same when it comes to movies and TV shows. While this doesn't excuse nor make these extreme opinions correct or even good for the industry, because they're not, they're just censorship from another side. Unhinged censorship at that, if you take into account the aforementioned three numbnuts who look at First Ascendant and see corn. While this stuff is not excused, it is understandable why it happened. The industry and the games media cultivated this environment. And now, in order to regain that trust or to rebuild it, the attitude from Daniel Vavra is not the way to go. The way to go is to be open and honest. Gamers see through the bullshit. If you cut the bullshit out and just be honest, you'll at least rebuild that trust because you're informing your customers of what's exactly going on behind the scenes and letting them make their own decisions. But the worst part is that it isn't even the games media and the industry's insiders' problems anymore, because as I said, they're having a blast. They're giving this game 8s, 9s and 10s, they're sharing the Kiss screenshot and blasting their how to be gay guides all over social media, like they know what they're doing. They're feeling this divide. This is what you do when you have strong opposition, you separate it, and you let them fight each other while you gain power in the vacuum, taking advantage of when one side is going too far and identifying your side with success. It's partly what happened in reverse with the woke flops. A game or a show or a movie would fail and we would point to it and be like, see, this doesn't sell, stop making this. And now while people like Delaroz and Trent and these other Twitter pages and etc. associate this game with nothing else than the gay scene, when they make that its core identity, they're going to say, see, this sells, keep making this, even though in reality we all know that it's not the decision to make Henry gay that is making this game successful. It's everything else. It's the fact that it's a good RPG. It's just like Baldur's Gate 3. It isn't the diversity and inclusion in that game that sold it. It's the fact that Larian made a great RPG despite it. We already saw what happens when a game focuses on those diversity and inclusion elements instead. It creates shit like Dustborn and Veilguard. In other words, original games nobody wants to touch and sequels to massive franchises that destroy them. So it's going to be our fucking problem to deal with going forward. So I'd rather not see creators from the same spaces who like agree on fucking 90% of the shit that they talk about, getting all uppity on social media and fighting each other and making public ass posts inviting morons from their own fan bases to come in and escalate these problems, turning it into public beefs just because of something that landed on the 10% that they don't agree on. But anyway, that's about it from me on this one. This is probably going to end up being way too long for people to bother watching, but hey, if you did stick around, I hope this helped put things into perspective. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you're new, welcome to the shit show and subscribe for more ravioli. From this point here, I will still be playing and giving Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 a fair analysis based on the game's merits. I don't really have trouble separating the controversy from the content itself right now. I just wish that it hadn't turned out the way that it did. A lot of damage could have been averted if the PR hadn't gone downhill, but what's done is done. It is what it is. Thank you very much for watching, have yourselves a great day, and I will see you on the next video.